All right. So here we are, everyone. Welcome. We have another workshop. It's this guy again, and I'm doing these things. I'm talking about things and maybe even some stuff. Now, tonight, our workshop is focused on culture. Before we dive into creating the culture for our plant people, that was the result of last night. What is culture? Or it's probably a little bit better to explore what comprises culture, as it's a lot. And it's, well, Venn diagrams were memed a little bit in chat last night. I think Daly especially was bringing that up. The culture is ultimately that middle portion of everything else about a people. And when we were discussing the creation of intelligent life, we went through a lot here. We went through the evolution of human beings. We went through just the ages of men, according to Hesiod. We went over what is sapience and sentience. We saw an example of intelligent life, both what we might consider primitive and advanced, although there's going to be a day when this is actually primitive. We discussed civilization as being that mark of an intelligent species. Not just a communal species, but an intelligent one. One that does practice wisdom, sapience, and sentience as well, to feel for others, and emotional intelligence. There's a trend, especially with businesses. There's different personality tests and everything. There's an emotional IQ that has also been a source of measure, because how intelligent you are can be important for things. Though if you are lacking empathy, or if we're looking at something even along the lines of a diagnosis of being somewhere on the autism spectrum, and you have some disconnect or inability to read things on an emotional level, or if you're dyslexic and you have trouble reading things as a processing, but learning about how emotionally intelligent you are as well has been a subject of measure and study. Not just, well, you memorized the multiplication tables, you memorized all of the capitals of the states because you watched the Yakko song from Animaniacs, or you read a manga, which this has been a very popular way to actually teach. You read a manga where a particular realm of sport, lifestyle, or science is put through a drama of some kind or a presentation. There's one that teaches nutrition and dietary habits, and it involves elves from a different world. I'll leave it at that. If you want to investigate it, I think that's in the realm of PG-13, but be careful all the same. Well, because of cultural differences, right? Things that may be fine in one society may not be fine for the other. We had a little bit of the exploration of intelligent life, or even the beginning of culture, also through this summary and analysis of the Cain and Abel story, which itself was a look back, just as Hesiod's 5 Ages, was a look back through the ages and almost a lamentation or a warning of what happens when you stray from this pastoral hunter-gatherer life, of this reliance upon God for everything, to one where you are creating your own tools, you are raising your own animals, your own crops. If you don't like a mountain or you want the resources in it, you can knock it down and turn it into whatever you want. And so there's stories that are baked into this, right? So this brings us back around to our culture wheel, and how culture is a composition. Hi, Urians, welcome. And how culture is a composition of many aspects of life. Real quick, I'm going to give a shout out to a fellow streamer. There we go. Now, this graphic in particular is, you can find that here if you wish. The article's not necessarily bad, but there's some spelling or just some weird compositional things. I really wanted to make sure that this very vibrant graphic was the starting point of our discussion. And then I gotta read a bunch of boring words. Whoa. But before I read the boring words, and hopefully I'll make them palatable and entertaining for you all, and maybe even give you things to think about, or if you have done this in your world, in your fantasy world, or this is just something you've personally enjoyed studying among humans of all walks of life all around the globe, right? We still need to make sure, well, our culture is born from these things. If we need to assure our physiological needs, our culture that we develop is going to make sure that these things are as available as possible. For example, I don't know if there's a culture that doesn't, but we have a need to pee pee and poo poo. You can giggle, I said the words. And where you go, there are, at least for the most part, I'd hope, bathrooms provided, because this is a physiological need. And even if it's not something, that you really enjoy thinking about 24/7, it's not your thing, it's still something that happens, and it must be accounted for. And so our culture will develop around the ability for you to excrete, though you might find in different ways how that is handled. You might have a standardization, such as the Roman legions latrines, where in every camp, they were dug a certain depth, a certain length, a certain distance away from the camp. It was very rote, right? You have even here in Ohio, you have sewer systems in cities, and you go a little bit outside of the city, you could still find a sewer system. Or we have there are laws or rules or cultural accommodations for septic tanks. You'll find different accommodations for that. There's cultures around built up also around sleep. Different. I suggest putting a little an essential oil under your nose as you sleep, or put a crystal on your forehead to focus your energy, or to remove toxins or something. So up along Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can see that we're building culture, and that the culture that we practice is a result of these influences from different tiers. And we'll come back to this when we swap over to actually building the culture for our plant-based people. Xanderfell, hello. Here's a suggestion for world builders trying to figure out what their countries are. Google list of crecies. I found out what one of mine was called via that list. A craterocracy. I'm not sure what is a cracy, Xander. If you can explain that. And also, thank you for joining our workshop. This is going to be a little bit of story time. Hey, Ryufu Silverlight, welcome. Hey, you're in my territory now. Thanks. It's good to see you, my friend. Oh, okay. All right. Let me give you a quick shout out as a fellow streamer. Boom, there we go. And of governmental systems, those are products of culture too. Now, we read this before when we were creating life in our universe, in the very early stages of our world building, when we were building a world. When we had our proto world and we were discussing how continents rise and fall and the seas flow and constrict and erosion happens and all this other stuff, and then we had life, just kind of crawling up out of the ooze. And especially given what you all voted on in the workshop last night, the creature involved here isn't that far removed. But anyway, this is story time. In fact, I'm going to take you for story time. Yay! I'm going to take you to the shores of a sea. Are you ready? This is from the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. Oh, that's awesome, Daly. This story takes place a 500 million years ago, an inconceivably long time ago, when this planet would be all but recognizable to you. Nothing at all stirred on the land except the wind and the dust. Not a single blade of grass waved in the wind, not a single cricket chirped, not a single bird soared in the sky. All these things were tens of millions of years away in the future. But of course, there was an anthropologist on hand. What sort of world would it be without an anthropologist? He was, however, a very depressed and disillusioned anthropologist, for he'd been everywhere on the planet looking for someone to interview, and every tape in his knapsack was as blank as the sky. But one day, as he was moping alongside the ocean, he saw what seemed to be a living creature in the shallows offshore. It was nothing to brag about, just sort of a squishy blob. But it was the only prospect he'd seen in all his journeys. So he waded out to where it was bobbing in the waves. He greeted the creature politely and was greeted in kind, and soon the two of them were good friends. The anthropologist explained as well as he could that he was a student of lifestyles and there's that word, customs, and begged his new friend for information of this sort, which was readily forthcoming. And now he said at last, "I'd like to get on tape in your own words some of the stories you tell among yourselves." Stories? The other asked. Well, like your creation myth if you have one. What creation myth? The creature asked. Oh, the anthropologist replied. The fanciful tale you tell your children about the origin of the world. Well, at this, the creature drew itself up indignantly, at least as well as a squishy blob can do, and replied that his people had no such fanciful tale. You have no account of creation, then? Certainly, we have an account of creation, the other snapped, but it's definitely not a myth. Oh, certainly not, the anthropologist said, remembering his training at last. I'll be terribly grateful if you share it with me. Very well, the creature said, but I want you to understand that, like you, we are a strictly rational people who accept nothing that is not based on observation, logic, and scientific method. Of course, the anthropologist agreed. So, at last, the creature began its story. The universe, it said, was born a long, long time ago, perhaps 10 or 15 billion years ago. Our own solar system, this star, this planet, and all the others, seem to have come into being some 2 or 3 billion years ago. For a long time, nothing would ever lived here. But then, after a billion years or so, life appeared. Excuse me, the anthropologist said. You say that life appeared. Where did that happen, according to your myth? I mean, according to your scientific account. The creature seemed baffled by the question and turned a pale lavender. Do you mean in what precise spot? No, I mean, did this happen on land or in the sea? Land? The other asked. What is land? Oh, you know, he said, waving towards the shore. The expanse of dirt and rocks that begins over there. The creature turned a deeper shade of lavender and said, I can't imagine what you're gibbering about. The dirt and rocks over there are simply the lip of the vast bowl that holds the sea. Oh, yes, the anthropologist said. I see what you mean. Quite. Go on. Very well, the other said. For many millions of centuries, the life of the world was merely microorganisms floating helplessly in a chemical broth. But little by little, more complex forms appeared. Single-celled creatures, slimes, algae, polyps, and so on. But finally, the creature said, turning quite pink with pride as he came to the climax of his story. But finally, jellyfish appeared. But finally, jellyfish appeared. I wonder what this can convey. What does this mean for the culture of the jellyfish? It would seem that at this point in time, the jellyfish are the most culturally advanced creatures around. They are the most intelligent. They are the hardiest. They are the apex predator. They are the ones who are so proliferate. They can be found everywhere. And the seas are theirs. Now, mind you, the jellyfish used every bit of scientific reasoning and observation. There was no, hand of a creator, even invoking the clockmaker. And yet here we have jellyfish as the rulers of the earth. and their culture is superior. And the things that they've discovered and value are the most worthy of being recognized. Now, I wonder if there's actually a little bit greater meaning and thought behind the story of the jellyfish. I'll let you ponder on that, but given the creature that you all actually voted on uplifting into sentience last night, this story may not be as far away as you think. Hi, Raven. Pardon. So, what is culture? Right? Let's get into the boring reading. Oh, gross. Words again. 2 out of 10. Unsubscribe, unfollow. Get out of here. Culture encompasses religion, food, what we wear, how we wear it, our language, marriage, music, and is different all over the world. Culture is the characteristic. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, everyone. If you wanted to read that and some other quotes, here's the link. And if you want to read along with what we're going to go over here to continue to set up the framework of thinking about culture to set us up for making one, there's that link as well. Culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people, encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. The Center for Advanced Research on Language Acquisition goes a step further, defining culture as shared patterns of behaviors and interactions, cognitive constructs, and understanding that I got ahead of myself. Cognitive constructs and understanding that are learned by socialization. Thus, culture can be seen as the growth of a group identity fostered by social patterns unique to the group. Culture encompasses, well, what we had talked about, including what we believe is right or wrong, how we sit at the table, how we greet visitors, how we behave with loved ones, and a million other things. Many countries, such as France, Italy, Germany, the US, India, Russia, and China, are noted for their rich cultures, the customs, traditions, music, art, and food being a continual draw for tourists. The word culture derives from a French term, which in turn derives from Latin colere, which means to tend to the earth and grow, or cultivation and nurture, according to Arthur Asa Berger. It shares its etymology with a number of other words related to actively fostering growth. You know, if you go to a doctor and they want to test if you got strep throat or something, right? What do? They take a culture also of your of the bacteria to grow and examine. The term Western culture has come to define the culture of European countries, as well as those that have been heavily influenced by European immigration, such as the United States, according to Khan University. Western culture has its roots in the classical period of the Greco-Roman era, the 4th and 5th centuries BC, and the rise of Christianity in the 14th century. Other drivers of Western culture include Latin, Celtic, Germanic, and Hellenic ethnic and linguistic groups. Any number of historical events have helped shape Western culture during the past 2,500 years. The fall of Rome, often pegged to AD 476, cleared the way for the establishment of a series of often warring states in Europe, according to Stanford University historian Walter Scheidel, each with their own cultures. The Black Death of the 1300s cut the population of Europe by 1/3 to 1/2, rapidly remaking society. Thank you. Oh my gosh, 17 months already, Jurassic Spark. Thank you. And welcome to you. Thank you for joining our workshop. Xanderfell says, my world is a bit different. I have two species who were created first, but the rest of the world belies that dragons and elves came first. I guess that's believes that dragons and elves came first, since no one has really met the actual first created. Are you saving that in reserve for the big story, like the big plot bomb? Dun dun dun. The Black Death, the Black Plague. Much as we described extinction events in the physical formation of the planet and how life began and was reset, cultures are often reset by extinction level events as well. It's just a different kind of extinction. As a result of the plague, writes Ohio State University historian John Elbrook, Christianity became stronger in Europe with more focus on apocalyptic themes. Survivors in the working class gained more power as elites were forced to pay more for scarce labor, and the disruption of trade routes between East and West set off new exploration and ultimately the incursion of Europeans into North and South America. Today, the influences of Western culture can be seen in almost every country in the world. Eastern culture generally refers to the societal norms of countries in Far East Asia, including China, Japan, Vietnam, North Korea, and South Korea, and the Indian subcontinent. Like the West, Eastern culture was heavily influenced by religion during its early development, but it was also heavily influenced by the growth and harvesting of rice, according to a research article published in the journal Rice in 2012. In general, in Eastern culture, there is less of a distinction between secular society and religious philosophy than there is in the West. However, this umbrella covers an enormous range of traditions and histories. For example, Buddhism originated in India, but it was largely overtaken by Hinduism after the 12th century, according to Britannica. As a result, Hinduism became a major driver of culture in India, while Buddhism continued to exert influence in China and Japan. The pre-existing cultural ideas in these areas also influenced religion. For example, according to Jai-He Liu and Dongfang Shao, Chinese Buddhism borrowed from the philosophy of Taoism, which emphasizes compassion, frugality, and humility. Centuries of interactions, both peaceful and aggressive, in this region also led to these cultures influencing each other. Japan, for example, controlled or occupied Korea in some form between 1876 and 1945. During this time, many Koreans were pressured or forced into giving up their names for Japanese surnames. Then it goes into geographical region here. We have Latin culture. I don't want to read the entire, because there's a lot here. You have the link. I'll provide it one more time. That's a primer into what are some examples that have added to two cultures, and of course it's touching on the phenomenon known as cultural appropriation, and it does bring up that cultures have constant change. If we are to speak, at least in an ethnocentric fashion here, as someone who lives in the United States, just look at how quickly U.S. culture has shifted over the last 100 years. The words we use, the technology we use, the shift in political beliefs, of philosophies, of just our lifestyles, our expectations for ourselves and each other, or broadly society. There's a lot, and 100 years is not a long time. So there's the link one more time if you want to read more in depth about that here, and you can follow the links and go on those fun journeys of continued discovery. Big Bane says, when the Paladin and Bard accidentally find the spaceship I hid in the woods. I'm not sure I get the reference, Big Bane. Zanderfell says Romans were pretty goofy when it came to religion. If they conquered a country or small tribe who had gods, they believed the inherited the responsibility of paying dues to those gods. Even though they had their primary, they had a better not to anger other gods if we can help it policy. Now, what are some characteristics of culture? Let's continue this exploration from a slightly different angle. Not just, well, here are events that could lead into culture. There are many definitions of culture. Oh, hang on, let me make sure that this is listed too. All right, cite your sources, kids. But the most famous one is from E.B. Tyler in 1871, which says, culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Woo, what a mouthful. Basically, this definition just means that culture is the whole way of living, from knowledge and beliefs to customs and habits. But still, that's not a very clear definition. Basically, culture is how people think and behave. This is a super short definition. For as much as we're reading, and I want to give you things to consider. Shut the door. Were you raised in a barn? Do you talk to your mother with that tone of voice? Wait, I can't have the chopsticks straight up in the rice? Culture has several aspects to it. There are several characteristics of culture. Culture is learned, shared, symbolic, integrated, adaptive, and dynamic. Let's go through these characteristics of culture one by one. Culture is learned. So let's start with the first of the characteristics of culture. Culture is learned. Culture is not genetic. We are not born with culture. A baby can be raised in any culture, and he or she will learn that culture, that religion, that language, and the skills that are important in that culture, whether it's spear throwing or computer programming. We learn our culture as we grow up in it, through a process called enculturation. It is also known as socialization. And this is why it's great to learn of other cultures. How do other people live? Hi, Dugan. We learn culture both formally and informally. For example, we learn our religion formally through an institution such as a church or mosque or synagogue. We learn our history and language at schools through history lessons and English lessons, but we also learn our culture informally and unconsciously from family, friends, and the media. We observe and imitate others, and communicate with others, absorbing and learning our culture in the process. For example, you probably know how far apart you should stand from people if you are talking to them. Even though it probably wasn't taught to you directly, you absorb this as part of your culture unconsciously. Think about this. All humans have the same basic physical needs. For example, food. We're getting back to this, huh? Food, sleep, and shelter. But the way that they meet those needs is based on culture. For example, everyone needs food, but different cultures eat at different times during the day, prepare food differently, and eat different foods. And you did not discover on your own what is considered food in your culture and what isn't. You learn that from other people. So while everyone needs food, culture tells us how to fulfill that need. And this is done through the process of enculturation. Each person learns the way their culture does things and the way their culture satisfies those basic human needs. Yeah, hi, Dugan. The videos will end up on YouTube, so if you're watching this in the future on YouTube, hi, YouTube. Hi, chat, you can say hi, YouTube, if you want. Well, see, and so in a fantasy world, tieflings may not eat human food. In fact, now memes. Oh, geez, we can get into genes and memes as kind of a part of this too, as memes, especially in more recent years, are very much overtly a part of our culture. There is a very good D&D style meme that talked about tieflings using salt like uh, humans use chili peppers, with the concept being as tieflings have some fiendish blood, right? Their genetics are such that there is some kind of a devil or demon as part of them, and if the traditional warding or containment of them is true, like a circle of salt, then that part of the tiefling would treat salt not like we would treat salt, but a tiefling would add a little bit of salt to a meal to get that spicy burn on his or her tongue because of the way the salt would interact with, pardon, the biology. There's hi dragon. When it came to, did no one really taught you how far away to stand? But if any of you, and this might apply more to people who are using urinals, there's an unspoken rule that's usually not taught in school. I mean, it might be taught in private by your parents or something. Of if there's if there's 3 urinals and someone's standing at this one using it, you stand here and use this one. And that could even be if there's barrier walls here between them. So how do we enter into relationships, our closeness? Another funny one was it was kind of a got him at the end. It was a scene of like, just stretch and casually put my, and you're like, people at a movie theater or something, young love, you're trying to put the moves on. You do that classic, you put the elbow around the other person. And then the punchline was that the guy at the urinal next to me just looked over at me like, "What am I doing?" But that's cultural, right? Or at least the humor in that is that's not usually what you find in culture. At least this culture. Yeah, that's a way that we'll see. Now, what the situation daily set up, if there's 3 urinals, use the middle one and make the next person in decide which side they want. So if that's the case, there's 3 and you take the center, that's an assertion of dominance, or that is a like you've made yourself an unignorable presence to other people. And you didn't have to say a single word. You don't have to wear particular colors or have a bumper sticker or anything. The fact that of the 3, you are using the middle urinal says a lot, and it puts out cultural vibes. So culture is shared. As it's passed down through generations, even through trade in between countries here, between members of a group, meaning they all think and behave the same way because they grew up in the same culture. And in many instances, that makes it easy to conduct our lively business, whether it is just the business of I need to find a place to drink water, eat food, or sleep, or you get into economic into like a political negotiations and arranged marriages and all these other things too. And that's why if there's 2 cultures that might clash, well, that can lead to strife, struggle. It could also lead to great things like an understanding or even an improvement for the 2 of them as they look at how each of each other have lived and operated and say, maybe what are the best parts of each of these that we can incorporate to be better people. That's the hope anyway, but I mean, would that had happened, right? More often than not. So here's an example about the Amish here in the U.S. Of course, then we have other manifestations of culture. I don't want to and even counterculture is a culture itself. So I'll list this one more time because I'm not reading the entire article for you. I want to save that for you to explore and really absorb. Right? But we do have symbols. There's an aspect of counterculture in our world. These colors. Oh, hey, Dugan, thank you. We are now closer to summoning Tiamat, everyone. I do, Dugan. It's the Hero Zone. As well as a YouTube at the Hero Zone as well. And Twitter is the same too. Thank you for asking. So there's different symbols for religions, or just in a culture. Red is stop, green is go. Which, of course, at least in the U.S., this has led to the great debate in exit signs. In a fire emergency, why do you want red, which is a stop color? Instead, you want a bright green, go, go, go to the exit, right? So there's a lot here about infrastructure, superstructure, the social structures, adapting across cultures, maladaption as well, how things are relative and how they're dynamic. Please do give this a read. This is a very good perspective, and there's nothing that is necessarily like you're not reading a doctoral thesis on culture. I want to make sure that these are things that are very easily, you can just sit down, spend 5 minutes reading it, and boom, you're like, wow, that makes sense, and that can help me put perspective on some more things. This is a very big link. No, Dugan. Oh, that didn't really work out. Well, hopefully, I don't know if you copy the whole link, that will bring you here. But there is non-material culture as well as material culture. There are things that are just more acceptable in a physical format, or are more common in a format, as culture also relates to our tools and our technology and things along those lines, and the way that those things are presented. Eating utensils, means of transportation, is material. Values, beliefs, symbols is non-material. There's symbolism. Now, if you look at this here, I mean, number one, got him. All right, got him. This is okay. Everything's okay. Are you a scuba diver? How's your oxygen level? Okay. In Japan, this is money because coins are round. This is money in Japan. But to other people, this is okay. I gotcha. Okay. Though in other parts of Europe, this is a rude symbol. It is an obscenity. It could mean something else. So in your culture, it's something you say or do, a color you wear, or even things that you don't specifically do. In that particular culture could be seen as grating, offensive, just a sign of ignorance, or that it may not be bad, but yeah, you're a foreigner for sure. You know, you are a tourist. Uh, as the most important symbol is language. This is how we are communicating many ideas. We're describing the world around us, the tangible things and the intangible things. How many unifications or disruptions have been caused by words? Or even by the misunderstanding of words, or the incompleteness? Or someone is saying something very important, but the way the words are spoken is dry and boorish. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying not to be. And then that leads to, well, you know, it could have been said better. And well, results of that happen as they do. So this is written with a lot of very interesting examinations, things that are brought up. Yeah, it is. It could be partially based on the biology of the species that's talking. For example, Xander, to accommodate for like the draconic language in my world, there's almost no way that a humanoid can actually speak draconic. So in many ways it's treated like a lost language. There's a modern interpretation of how to do it, but a human does not have the biology to speak draconic words. You don't have the muzzle, you don't have the maybe like a rumble capacity in your chest, you don't have the particular length or girth or flexibility of a tongue to ra or whatever else that's necessary, or to put a big emphasis or some other kind of onomatopoeia, or just another way that there might be a unique noise that dragons can make that we can't simulate. And we see that in some languages here in our own world, as we're very used to speaking with what we consider to be words, but there are also there can be like a click, or even if this is not in an official language, you know, but I go, you know, you understand that language, you know what means. Hey, come over here, you. So there's a lot here, and this is going to be a little bit more academic in its approach. It's not unintelligible, but this is more of just that scientific approach, as it brings up things. Well, like how do cultures accept or reject sexual preferences, or the expressions of that? How about various rituals? And rituals can be religious. It could be more of a folklore superstition. You know, the sports athlete, the star quarterback under the Friday Night Lights, has worn the same socks all the time because those are the lucky socks. Or the ritual could be a very you know, a holy gesture, or it could be a very casual spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch, right? Boop, 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 and there you go. Changing norms and beliefs. Oh my gosh, when the Beatles, when the British invasion happened and rock and roll was on the rise, oh, Satan himself was cooking America, right? And all sorts of other things that come about through pop culture, music, through government and law, the application of it, the interpretation or the manufacture of it. So there's a lot here to go through and consider, if nothing else. Whether you accept or reject any of it, if you've considered it, that is the mark of the educated mind, according to Aristotle. To be able to accept an idea without necessarily needing or to entertain an idea without the necessity of accepting it. So there's here to go over. And was I gonna do this? This is gonna be a quicker, because I actually have an audio video presentation for you all. You all have been very good in class, and don't worry, this section is almost at its end, as I will wrap up culture with an audio video. I'm gonna wheel out the TV, and I'm gonna put on Bill Nye. No, I'm not gonna put on Bill Nye for you. It's Beakman's World. Come on, he had the better show, right? I like the rat. Anyway, so language, vocal cord. Yeah, vocal cords could play into it too. An anime called To Your Eternity has a tribe of people called the Clay Pot People who use their clay pots to communicate. They do actually speak with their tongue. They use clay pots to convey it. Oh, they don't speak with their tongue. Yeah. So 8 cultural variables. Once more, here is the link. I don't know if that whole thing will post. No, it cut off after a bit anyway. Human nature, although in this case we're going to replace that with our plant people. Time, action, context, and formality. We have High German and Low German. We have polite Japanese and just casual Japanese. And when it comes to language anyway, there's different ways you carry yourself and posture and body language and all this. Space, power distance, individualism and collectivism. If my smoking bothers you, don't breathe. So, very good things to consider and to compare. I don't have that open right now, but I appreciate you mentioning that, Xanderfell. All right, now, where is it, or how am I going to draw culture? Everything we've talked about, including the past workshops about, the signs of civilization, intelligent life, aspects of what we brought up about socialization, about the priorities of things, how about culture taking care of as much of as a result, right? As we find a pattern in a place with what we have available as ourselves or the environment, right? Nature and nurture, culture's born out of it. Let me show you an example. Okay. If you don't know, this is depicting a version of the Battle of Thermopylae against the invading Persians.
Stifling. It narrowed his vision, but he must see far. His shield was heavy. It threw him off balance, and his target is far away. The old ones say we Spartans are descended from Hercules himself. Bold Leonidas gives testament to our bloodline. His roar is long and loud.
What are we seeing here? That's cultural. There's a lot. Though this is the comic book version by Frank Miller.
It's an honor to die at your side.
What is making this a believable culture?
To have lived at yours.
My queen!
My wife. My love.
What did we see? We saw a version presented of Spartan culture. But let's take a look. Why is this still identifiable to us so far removed from the Battle of Thermopylae? What did we see? What are the Spartans fighting for? They're fighting for their physiological needs. They're fighting for the security of also what? Family, wife, property, their land, their country, their morals that they have upheld as a society. And we even, with King Leonidas, again, as we talked about the hierarchy, kings, high-ranking officials, and others do tend to be further up. But we at least are seeing among even the common troops. Chex Mix, thank you for the follow and welcome. There's a ghost. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chex Mix. In that scene, did we also see a sense of friendship, family, intimacy, if not between Leonidas and his queen? Was there, in a sense, a brotherhood or a physical intimacy between the troops too, between the soldiers? And though this is it was a historical battle, and this is an interpretation of Frank Miller through pop culture and comics through a graphic novel of 300. This is an interpretation of that. We hit all of this through culture. Where's this starting? It's even the Persian culture. In the Persian culture, look how richly appointed they are. Xerxes, covered in gold and jewels. The soldiers had armor and all these weapons. Here, what's valued? This is the culture he's fighting to preserve. And as dirty and dingy here, it's now juxtaposed to this invading culture, to this foreign culture. What do we see here? Despite sailing across the sea over the lands, Xerxes' platform here. Look how mirror sheen and clean it is, wrought with precious metals, such that Leonidas' spear is seen in the reflection. And in the presentation, a chipped, dirty, bloody spear. The king in battered, almost no armor. But now the other culture. Right there. What does this tell you? There are differences in belief, in military structure, in the priorities of their leaders, as we have two kings. And how different are they despite being kings of their people? Both of skilled warriors. Both existing in close-ish enough, in the grand scheme of the globe, closest enough proximity. And I want to conclude this with perhaps the same story but different, and another demonstration of culture, also from Frank Miller, and in a more modern setting. And I wonder just how universal these concepts of culture are, despite centuries, millennia separating us as societies.
You'll explain to me why we shouldn't blow both of you to pieces.
Dwight, what have you done?
Exactly what I had to. Every step of the way.
No! It isn't right! There wasn't no tape over his mouth! How come there's tape over his mouth?
Where to fight counts for a lot.
You tricked McCarthy, but it will do you no good.
But there's nothing like having your friends show up with lots of guns.
No! McCarthy, you shan't!
The girls all know the score. No escape. No surrender. No mercy. We gotta kill every last rat bastard one of them. Every last one. Not for revenge. Not because they deserve it. Not because it'll make the world a better place. We need a heap of bloody bodies so when mob boss Valanquist looks over his charts of profits and losses, he'll see what it cost him to mess with the girls of Old Town. The Valkyrie at my side is shouting and laughing with the pure, hateful, bloodthirsty joy of the slaughter. And so am I. The fire, baby. It'll burn us both. There's no place in this world for our kind of fire. My warrior woman. My Valkyrie. You'll always be mine. Always. And never.
This was also a demonstration of culture, not just with the architecture, the fact that there were guns and, more modern style weapons. Two factions of people. Two people who shared a very close proximity, yet lived very different lives. And very similar lives in some senses. I won't spoil the details if you're not familiar with Sin City or this particular scene from the movie. But this was also a demonstration of culture. Did you also see how is it that either group, although one was more weighed heavily than the other, were taking care of their physiological needs. How about the safety? The girls of Old Town. The girls of Old Town practice a very old profession. I'll put it that way. Employment, resources, the family that they create to protect each other because of the nature of their jobs. The security of their body. How does the culture reinforce that, you know what, we got to send a message? And at the same moment, there was intimacy between Dwight and his Valkyrie. Yeah, the Imperium of Man is a very special place, Xanderfell. And also, Ready to Nap. Welcome. So, I promised you all it wasn't going to be a bunch of boring words. You got to see a little bit, and it got to wrap up a lot of what we talked about regarding culture, regarding the expressions of it, the influences that go into it, about how it is about location and resources and the environment, and about just as the times change too. As the plague shifted the tone of religion, which in turn shifts the tone of so many other things. That led to, and there was a good chart here about this, the integration. As one of these variables spins in different major or small ways, it affects everything else, for better or worse. And that's why you have culture warriors and culture defenders. That's why you have people pushing for a brand new future, for so they want to make a sense of progress. You have others who go, whoa, 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 hold on, these are what has worked, and they wish to conserve the old ways, the traditions. And with every variable that life can throw at us, it's a constant sway. Everything is in motion. And somewhere in that chaotic, it's not even the Venn diagram that's 2D and you just get that center portion. It is a sphere of constantly intersecting, smushing, eliminating, spawned out of nothingness variables. And that's why it can feel tough to keep up sometimes. I'll tell you, as someone whose job is pop culture, there are some very awesome times, and there's some times where you just go, what is this? And not even as like, well, he's getting old. What's he gonna be, 26 years old on his next birthday? Yeah, old man, 26, I get it. I'm more than a quarter century old. Is it just that, or are there things in pop culture right now that are just severely disappointing, are creatively bankrupt, are schemed or hollowed out, or just milked dry to the point where people can't even be dispassionate about it? They just don't care, which is actually the worst fate. And we all are going to face that throughout our lives, because we are participants, willing or unwilling, in cultures in which we act and live or wish to be a part of. As people want to move to the country, people want to move to the city, people like, oh, I want to live in Japan, and they want to move to Japan because they want to be in that culture. That kind of a thing, right? So it's very interesting to look at culture, both from these, more not blandly stated, but just from a studious approach, but also getting right in the mix and using examples that for most of us have met through Twitch, social media, streaming, pop culture, and especially D&D, another subsect of pop culture, role-playing, storytelling, draws in cultural elements, expresses cultural elements. And sometimes to make that example, we get something super close to us, and that's our starting point, and then we explore outwards from there and find out how we grow, in which directions we take throughout life. And we might find our cultural values or opinions do shift as a generation broadly, or as an individual, or as a family, or another small group. And in there, it's arguably never been easier to find a small group than through something like social media, where you seek a tribe of people who will agree with you, who will not disagree with you, or nor possibly even challenge you, and you just want to live there and only think about those things. It could be insular, it could be an echo chamber, it could be paradisical in all the best ways, not even some weird faux dystopia. Or, you know, finding yourself encapsulated like that with just a culture that will not allow anything else. Might actually feel stifling, or you feel trapped in it. You feel alone despite being in a group, even a group that at one time you were happily a part of, or that accepted you initially, and then you found out that it's a little bit more or less than what you wanted. And all of these are levels of culture. And I hope you can take your own experiences, and let's, in our next part of the workshop, apply the more simple concepts of it. About as far up as we're going is halfway on the pyramid, okay? But we'll cross that bridge in a bit. But I want us to now reflect on everything that we studied, quote unquote. You got to watch some movie clips at the end. Let's take what we've studied. I want to give you a different kind of a presentation, and I want, with your help, to create a beginning, like a primitive culture for the plant people we have made for our original fantasy setting. Okay? So I'll be back in just a bit. Hang tight, everyone. Go get a drink. Go do what you got to do. And I'll come back, and we're going to have an interactive workshop about making a fantasy culture using prompts from what we have studied in this part of it. So hold tight.